Chicago's oldest crime families did not ask a man like Sebastian Romano for love. They asked for loyalty, blood, silence, and a wife who could turn a violent empire into something that looked respectable under ballroom lights. For years, Sebastian had ruled the South Side with a steady hand and a colder heart, but one signature on one marriage contract was about to become more dangerous than every gun pointed at his back. He thought Mara Bennett would be easy, quiet, temporary, a soft woman with tired eyes, a desperate brother, and nowhere else to run. He thought he was buying a bride for 3 years. He had no idea he was inviting the only woman alive who could make the monster kneel. The rain came down hard over Chicago that night, washing the streets in silver and black, as Sebastian stood alone in the private dining room of Romano House, a members-only club hidden behind an unmarked red door in Bridgeport. Outside, the city moved like it always did, buses groaning through wet traffic, sirens crying somewhere far away, people rushing home with their heads down and their collars pulled high. But inside the club, everything was still. The air smelled of polished wood, expensive tobacco, and old money that had been earned in ugly ways. Men in dark suits waited along the walls with their hands folded in front of them and their eyes lowered, because no one looked directly at Sebastian Romano unless he allowed it. He was 36, tall, broad-shouldered, and frighteningly calm, with black hair brushed back from a face that looked carved from stone. His enemies called him the Saint of the South Side because he never raised his voice before ruining a man. His friends, if a man like him could have friends, knew better than to call him anything at all. Sebastian did not need noise to be feared. His silence did the work for him. Across from him sat 3 old men who had once controlled half of Chicago between them. Their hands trembled now when they lifted their glasses, but their names still opened union halls, courtrooms, church offices, and locked gates at the port. They were relics, but relics with keys Sebastian needed. For 7 years, he had fought to move his business from street corners and backroom deals into the shipping contracts along Lake Michigan. The port meant power that lasted. The port meant no one could starve him out. The port meant his enemies would have to come through federal inspectors, dock bosses, and old family oaths before they could touch him. But the old families did not trust a king without a queen. "You want the contracts," Salvatore Bellini said, tapping one thin finger against the table. His voice was dry and soft, like paper being folded. "Then you need a wife." Sebastian did not blink. "I need signatures." "You need stability," another old man said. "You are strong, Sebastian. Everyone knows this. But strength alone makes men nervous. A wife tells the families you plan to build, not just burn." Sebastian looked at the untouched glass of whiskey in front of him. Marriage had never interested him. Love, even less. Love was a door people left open, and then acted surprised when someone walked in with a knife. His father had loved his mother in the wild, reckless way that made men weak, and it had gotten them both killed before Sebastian was old enough to shave. Since then, he had kept his heart locked in the same place where he kept his clean money and his darkest secrets. Behind steel, behind codes, behind men who would die before speaking. "I will marry," Sebastian said at last. The old men relaxed, but only slightly. "She must be suitable," Bellini added. "She will be useful," Sebastian replied. That was how he thought of it. A wife could be arranged like anything else. A contract, a public image, a warm body beside him at galas and funerals and charity dinners where men with bloody hands pretended to care about children's hospitals. He did not need passion. He did not need softness. He needed a woman who would understand rules, obey limits, and leave when the 3 years were finished. That was why his men brought him the file on Mara Bennett. Her photograph sat on top of the folder by morning. Sebastian studied it in his office while the city turned pale beneath the windows. Mara was 29, a forensic accountant at a mid-level firm that handled insurance fraud, divorce settlements, hidden assets, and the kind of money people lied about when they thought no one smart was watching. She had warm brown skin, deep tired eyes, and thick dark hair pulled back in a loose knot. Her face was soft and pretty in a way that seemed unguarded, but her mouth held tension, like she had learned long ago not to expect kindness. She was plus size, with full cheeks, heavy curves, and a body the world probably judged before it ever reached her mind. Sebastian's gaze stayed on the photograph longer than he expected. Not because she was beautiful, though she was. Not because she looked fragile, because something in her eyes told him she was not. It was the loneliness. He recognized it instantly, because lonely people always recognized each other. Hers was different from his. His loneliness was a locked room. Hers looked like a room where the light had been left on for someone who never came home. His underboss, Nico, stood in front of the desk with his hands behind his back. Her younger brother owes Dante Varick's people $280,000. Sports betting, poker rooms, online credit. He borrowed from one crew to pay another until the numbers got stupid. Dante is squeezing him hard. Sebastian turned the page. Does she know? She knows enough. She's been making payments, not enough to matter. Sebastian read through the report. Mara Bennett had no criminal record, no powerful family, no protection, no scandal. She lived in a small apartment in Pilsen, paid her taxes, took the train to work, and bought cupcakes from the same bakery every Friday morning. She worked late. She tipped well. She called her landlord when the hallway light went out. A simple life. A quiet life. Exactly the sort of woman who could be brought into his world for a fixed time and then paid enough to forget him. But there was one note near the bottom of the page that made his eyes sharpen. She had uncovered an $8 million asset trail in a corporate fraud case that 3 senior investigators had missed. She had found shell accounts hidden under dead relatives, charity funds, and a fake medical supply company. She had done it alone. Smart, Sebastian said. Very, Nico replied, but cornered. Sebastian closed the folder. By the debt. Nico's eyebrows lifted. From Dante? From whoever holds it. He won't like that. Sebastian looked up slowly. Then he can dislike it quietly. By sunset, the debt belonged to Sebastian Romano. Mara Bennett found out the next morning in the worst way possible. She was standing outside her office building with a paper cup of coffee in one hand and her phone pressed to her ear, listening to her brother cry. Caleb was 24, too charming for his own good, and still young enough to believe consequences were something other people invented to scare him. His voice shook as he told her the men had stopped coming by his apartment. The threats had stopped. The balance had been moved. The name had changed. Romano. Mara felt the whole sidewalk tilt under her feet. Everyone in Chicago knew that name, even if they pretended not to. It lived in whispers between restaurant booths, in sudden silences when strangers walked into bars, in newspaper articles that never said enough, and police reports that said too much. Sebastian Romano was not a man you owed. He was not even a man you met, unless something had gone very wrong. Mara, I'm sorry, Caleb said, breathing hard. I didn't know what else to do. You didn't do anything, she whispered, though that was not true, and they both knew it. I can fix it. No, Caleb, you cannot. Her voice came out sharper than she meant it to, and the silence on the other end hurt more than his apology. She closed her eyes. She loved her brother. That had always been the problem. She had raised him through their mother's illness, through eviction notices, through nights when there was enough food for one person and she pretended she had already eaten. Caleb had been a sweet boy once, all messy curls and big dreams. But sweetness did not save a man from greed, shame, or bad tables in back rooms. Mara, he said softly, what are we going to do? She opened her eyes and looked at her reflection in the glass doors of her office building. Her navy dress was plain and careful, chosen to hide more than it showed. Her cardigan hung loose over her arms. Her face looked calm, because she had spent years learning how to fall apart only where no one could see. "I'll handle it," she said. That evening, a black car waited outside her building. Not a taxi, not a rideshare. A long, silent car with tinted windows and a driver who stepped out before she could pretend she had not seen him. He was polite, which somehow made it worse. He said her name like it had already been decided that she would get in. "Mr. Romano would like to speak with you." Mara looked down the busy street. People passed around her with umbrellas, take-out bags, earbuds, and ordinary lives. No one noticed the way fear had wrapped around her ribs. "And if I say no?" she asked. The driver's face did not change. "He hopes you will not." That was not an answer, and that was the answer. The ride took 20 minutes, though it felt much longer. Mara sat with her purse clutched in her lap and watched familiar streets turn into quieter ones. The car finally stopped outside a limestone mansion behind a high iron fence, the kind of place that looked less like a home and more like a decision no one was allowed to question. Warm lights glowed behind tall windows. Men stood near the gate and near the door and somewhere in the shadows beyond the hedges. She felt their eyes without seeing them. Inside, the mansion was beautiful, in a cold, careful way. Dark floors, cream walls, old paintings, fresh flowers in tall vases. Nothing out of place, nothing soft enough to touch without permission. The driver led her to a study, where a fire burned low in a marble fireplace, and Sebastian Romano stood beside the window with his back to her. For one strange second, Mara forgot to breathe. He looked exactly like the kind of man people invented stories about after midnight. Tall, still, dressed in a black suit that fit his body like it had been made by someone afraid to disappoint him. When he turned, his face held no welcome, no cruelty, no easy smile, only attention, complete attention. His dark eyes moved over her, not in the quick, dismissive way men usually looked at her body before deciding what box to put her in, but slowly, as if he were reading a language he intended to master. Mara hated that the look made her feel exposed. She hated even more that it did not feel like disgust. "Miss Bennett," he said. His voice was low, controlled, and quiet enough to make her listen harder. "Mr. Romano, sit. I'd rather stand." Something almost like interest touched his eyes. "As you wish." He walked to his desk and lifted a folder. She saw Caleb's name on it. Her stomach turned cold. "My brother made mistakes," she said quickly. "He's young and stupid, but he can pay you back. We can work out a plan." "No," Sebastian said. The word landed softly and ended everything. Mara's fingers tightened around the strap of her purse. "Then why am I here?" "Because your brother's debt is no longer a gambling problem. It is leverage. If Dante Varick had kept it, he would have used Caleb until there was nothing left of him. Then he would have used you. And you bought it out of kindness?" "No." The honesty was so clean it almost stunned her. Sebastian opened the folder and placed a document on the desk. "I need a wife." Mara stared at him. For a moment, the words made no sense. They floated in the warm air between the fireplace and the window, absurd and terrifying. She almost laughed, but the sound died in her throat when she realized he was not joking. "No," she said, "you have not heard the terms." "I do not need to hear the terms." "Yes, you do." He slid the document closer. 3 years, public appearances, charity events, family dinners. You will live in this house, use my name, and present yourself as my loyal wife. There will be rules for your safety and mine. At the end of the term, the marriage ends quietly. You leave with $5 million, a clean record, and your brother's debt erased. Mara felt heat rise behind her eyes, but she refused to cry in front of him. "You're buying me. I am offering you a contract. You bought my brother's debt and brought me here in a car I couldn't refuse. That is not an offer." Sebastian said nothing for a moment. The fire shifted behind him, sending gold light along the hard line of his jaw. "You are right," he said. That surprised her more than anything else. He continued, "The situation is not fair, but it is real. Dante Varick knows Caleb is weak and you are protective. He would have dragged you into his business one payment at a time. I have no interest in hurting your brother. I have no interest in touching your money. I need a wife with no ties to the old families and enough intelligence to follow a dangerous arrangement without making emotional mistakes." Mara let out a breath that almost shook. "And you chose me because you think I'll be grateful." "No," Sebastian said, his eyes holding hers. "I chose you because you are desperate." The words cut deeper because they were true. Mara looked away first. Her whole life had been built on swallowing unfair things and calling it survival. She had swallowed rude comments from clients who looked at her body before her reports. She had swallowed pity from co-workers who acted surprised when she was brilliant. She had swallowed Caleb's apologies, her own loneliness, the quiet ache of being useful to everyone and chosen by no one. But this was different. This was a cage with velvet walls. "What kind of wife?" she asked, hating herself for the question. "A public one," Sebastian replied. "Private expectations will be limited. You will have your own room, your own staff, your own accounts. I will not force affection from you." "How romantic." "I am not a romantic man." "No," Mara said softly. "I can see that." For the first time, something moved across his face that was not cold control. It was faint, almost invisible, but she saw it. A shadow of amusement, maybe, or warning. He picked up a pen and set it beside the contract. "Take the night, read it, have a lawyer review it." "A lawyer who isn't afraid of you? That may be difficult." She almost smiled, and that scared her. Sebastian noticed. His gaze dropped briefly to her mouth, then returned to her eyes, with a focus so sharp it made the room feel smaller. Mara stepped closer to the desk and looked down at the contract. The words blurred. Marriage, term, payment, confidentiality, residence, public conduct. The shape of her future written in black ink by a man who had not asked what she wanted, because wanting had nothing to do with it. "If I do this," she said, "Caleb is safe." "Yes." "Not just from you, from Dante, from everyone." "Yes. And when it ends, I leave. If that is what you want." She looked up. "It will be." Sebastian watched her with those unreadable dark eyes. "Then sign tomorrow." But Mara already knew she would not sleep. She knew she would go home and sit at her small kitchen table while Caleb called again and again, while rain tapped against the window and the whole city seemed to whisper one name, Romano. She knew she would think about the $5 million, the erased debt, the quiet threat of Dante Varick, and the man in the black suit who had looked at her like she was not invisible at all. Most of all, she knew she would remember how Sebastian had said he would not force affection from her. As if affection was the dangerous thing. As if the real danger was not standing in front of her, calm and beautiful and empty of mercy. The next morning, Mara Bennett signed her name beside his. The wedding happened 12 days later, in a private chapel with white roses, old women in pearls, and armed men pretending to be guests. Mara wore an ivory dress chosen by a stylist who kept saying words like flattering and forgiving until Mara wanted to disappear into the marble floor. The dress was beautiful, but she could not enjoy it. She kept pulling at the waist, at the sleeves, at every place the fabric touched her body, and reminded her that people would be looking. Sebastian noticed. He noticed everything. When the chapel doors opened and Mara walked toward him, the room went quiet in that strange way rooms did when they were deciding what kind of story to tell. She saw the judgment first, a glance from a woman in diamonds, a raised brow from a gray-haired man near the aisle, a young cousin whispering behind her hand. Mara felt each look like a small needle under her skin. Then Sebastian turned. His expression did not change much, but his eyes did. They darkened, sharpened, and fixed on her with such steady force that the rest of the room seemed to fade around them. He did not look embarrassed. He did not look disappointed. He looked like a man watching something that belonged in a locked vault. When she reached him, he offered his hand. Mara hesitated for the smallest moment before placing her fingers in his. His hand closed around hers, warm and firm. "You are trembling," he murmured. "I'm getting married to a crime boss in front of people who look like they're deciding whether I'm a joke." His thumb brushed once over her knuckles. "They are deciding whether they fear you yet." Mara almost looked at him. "Yet?" Sebastian faced the priest. "Begin." The vows were simple. The kiss was simpler. Sebastian leaned down, touched his mouth to hers for only a second, and still, Mara felt it through her whole body, like a match struck in a dark room. There was no tenderness in it, not exactly, no passion either, but there was promise, possession wrapped in restraint, a warning that this fake thing might still have teeth. Afterward, she moved into his mansion. Her room was on the east side of the second floor, with tall windows, cream curtains, and a sitting area larger than her old living room. Someone had filled the closet with clothes in her exact size, not shapeless things, not apologies made of fabric, soft sweaters, silk blouses, wide-leg trousers, wrap dresses, coats that fit her arms without pulling. Mara stood in the doorway of the closet for a long time, touching the sleeve of a deep green dress, unsure why her throat felt tight. The first weeks were painfully polite. Sebastian was not cruel to her. Cruelty would have been easier to hate. He was distant, formal, and controlled. He ate breakfast across from her, while reading messages on his phone. He asked if she needed anything. He informed her of public events. He had drivers take her wherever she needed to go. He never entered her room. He never touched her unless people were watching. In public, his hand would rest lightly at her lower back, and his voice would soften just enough to make strangers believe they were witnessing devotion. In private, he became a locked door again. Mara told herself she was relieved. She was not there to be loved. She was there to survive 3 years. Still, the mansion had a way of making loneliness louder. At night, she wandered quiet halls full of oil paintings and old shadows. She learned the names of the staff because no one else seemed to. Mrs. Alvarez ran the kitchen and missed her daughter in San Antonio. Thomas, the oldest driver, had arthritis in his left hand and hated asking for help with heavy bags. Lila, one of the younger maids, was saving for nursing school. Mara listened. She remembered. She left pain cream outside Thomas's office. She helped Lila fill out a financial aid form. She brought coffee to Mrs. Alvarez before breakfast service because the woman was always awake before everyone else. She did not know Sebastian saw these things, but he did. He saw Mara thank the guards by name. He saw her stop a young server from crying after dropping a tray during a dinner with Bellini's people. He saw her sit in the library late at night with financial statements spread across the table, her brow furrowed, her soft mouth pressed into a line of concentration. She had asked for access to her old work files to finish a case before resigning, and Sebastian had allowed it because he assumed it kept her calm. Then one night, he passed the open library door and stopped. Mara was standing barefoot on the rug, wearing a loose robe over her nightgown, her hair falling around her shoulders. Papers covered the table. She had a pencil tucked behind one ear and a calculator in her hand. "You are awake," he said. She jumped and turned. "So are you." "I live here." "So do I. Technically." That word sat between them. Technically. Sebastian walked in, his jacket gone, sleeves rolled to his forearms. He looked less like a king at that hour and more like a tired man who had forgotten how to rest. His gaze moved over the papers. "What is this?" "Old fraud case." A husband hiding money before a divorce. He thinks he's clever because he moved assets through a fake vendor connected to a landscaping company. And is he clever? No, Mara said. He's lazy. Lazy men always hide money in patterns they think are habits. Sebastian looked at her then, really looked, and Mara felt that strange exposed feeling again. What? She asked. You enjoy hunting lies. She glanced down at the papers. I enjoy finding what people think they buried. A silence followed, soft but charged. Sebastian stepped closer to the table and picked up one of the reports. Show me. Mara blinked. You actually want to know? Yes. So she showed him. She explained the fake invoices, the repeated numbers, the timing of transfers, the way greed made people predictable. At first, her voice was careful. But then it warmed. Her hands moved as she talked. Her eyes brightened. She forgot to hide her body, forgot to smooth her robe, forgot to make herself smaller. She became only her mind, quick and bright and alive. Sebastian watched her like a man discovering fire. When she finished, he set the paper down slowly. No one at your firm valued you properly. Mara's smile faded. People value what they want to see. I see you. The words were quiet. Too quiet. Mara's heart gave one hard beat. She looked at him, searching for mockery, and finding none. The room seemed to hold its breath. Outside, rain began to touch the windows. Then Sebastian's phone buzzed. Whatever had almost happened vanished behind his eyes. He read the message, and the cold man returned. I have business, he said. Of course. He left the library without another word, but Mara stood there long after he was gone, staring at the doorway, feeling the echo of his voice. I see you. She wished he had not said it. She wished, even more, that she had not believed him. By the time the charity gala arrived, Mara had learned how to stand beside Sebastian without flinching. The event was held in the grand ballroom of a hotel on Michigan Avenue, all chandeliers, champagne towers, white flowers, and rich people pretending their money had never touched anything dirty. The foundation supported children's hospitals, which made the room feel even stranger, because half the men writing checks had built their fortunes by breaking other people. Mara wore the deep green dress from her closet. It wrapped around her body with gentle confidence, showing her shape instead of hiding it. Lila had helped pin her hair back. Mrs. Alvarez had cried a little and called her beautiful in Spanish. Mara had laughed, embarrassed, but when she looked in the mirror, she did not hate what she saw. That alone felt dangerous. Sebastian waited at the bottom of the stairs. For once, his control slipped, only for a second. His eyes moved over her, and something dark and warm passed through them. Not business, not performance. Something that made Mara's skin feel too alive. You look? He stopped. She lifted her chin. Contract appropriate? His jaw tightened. No. The word was low, rough, honest. Before she could ask what he meant, he offered his arm. Come. At the gala, Sebastian became the version of himself Chicago feared and admired. Smooth, untouchable. A man who shook hands with judges, kissed old women on the cheek, and made powerful men laugh, while quietly deciding which of them deserved ruin. Mara stayed at his side, smiling when required, speaking when spoken to, and studying everything. She noticed alliances in glances, tension in pauses, secrets in who avoided whom. Sebastian noticed her noticing. You are reading the room, he murmured near her ear. You brought me to a room full of liars. A faint smile touched his mouth. And the man near the bar with the silver tie is scared of you, but angry enough to hide it badly. The woman in red has been watching your underboss all night. Bellini's nephew is drunk, which means he'll say something stupid before dessert. And the charity director is nervous because the donation totals don't match the pledge cards. Sebastian went very still. Mara looked up. What? Nothing, he said, though his eyes had changed again. Keep talking. She might have, if Carlo De Luca had not stepped into their path. Carlo was one of Sebastian's associates, a handsome man with shiny shoes, cruel eyes, and the lazy confidence of someone born into protection he had not earned. He kissed Mara's hand with a smile that never reached his face. "Mrs. Romano," he said. "What a surprise." Sebastian's hand settled at Mara's back. "Careful, Carlo." Carlo laughed lightly. "I only mean she is not what anyone expected. Sebastian always was practical, but this is very practical." Mara felt the room tilt. The insult was dressed well enough that others might pretend not to hear it, but they heard. Of course they heard. A few nearby conversations softened. Someone looked away too quickly. Carlo's gaze moved over her body with open amusement. "I suppose old families do love a sturdy foundation," he added. The words hit Mara in the place she kept hidden. For one terrible second, she was back in every office, every dressing room, every family party where someone had made her body public property. Her face burned, her throat tightened. Her first instinct was to retreat, to smile weakly, to make the moment smaller so everyone could move on comfortably. She shifted back half a step. Sebastian's hand caught her waist. Not hard. Not cruel. Firm enough to stop her from disappearing. The air changed. Mara felt it before she saw it. The quiet around them deepened. Sebastian turned his head slowly toward Carlo, and every warm light in the ballroom seemed to grow colder. "What did you say about my wife?" Sebastian asked. Carlo's smile faltered. "Sebastian, come on. It was a joke." "No." Sebastian's voice stayed soft. "Jokes are meant to amuse me." Carlo swallowed. "I meant no disrespect." "You meant to wound her quietly because you thought her silence gave you permission." Mara's heart pounded. "Sebastian," she whispered. He did not look away from Carlo. No. That single word was not for Carlo. It was for her. No, she would not shrink. No, she would not swallow this. No, she would not stand alone in a crowded room while people decided her pain was polite entertainment. Sebastian stepped closer to Carlo. "You will apologize to my wife." Carlo glanced around, humiliated now, his face coloring. "Mrs. Romano, I apologize." Sebastian's gaze hardened. "Again, like your life has value and you wish to keep it." Carlo went pale. His voice shook the second time. "Mrs. Romano, I am sorry. I was disrespectful, and I had no right." Mara could barely breathe. Every eye in the room was on her. She wanted to vanish. She wanted to cry. But Sebastian's hand remained at her waist, steady and warm, holding her in place like he believed she belonged there. So she lifted her chin. "Do not speak about me that way again," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. Carlo nodded quickly. "Never." Sebastian leaned in, his face close to Carlo's ear, but his words were clear enough for Mara to hear. "If you forget, I will remove you from every room where her name is spoken." Then he guided Mara away. No one laughed. The ballroom opened before them, as if the crowd itself had learned to move. Mara felt people watching now, but the looks were different. Fear, yes. Curiosity, surprise, maybe even respect. She did not know what to do with any of it. Sebastian led her to a quiet balcony overlooking the river. The cold air touched her hot cheeks. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Below, Chicago glittered like a dangerous promise. "I'm sorry," Sebastian said. Mara turned to him, startled. "You're sorry?" "I should have stopped him sooner." "You did stop him. After he hurt you." She looked down at her hands. They were shaking. "It's not new," she said softly. "Men like Carlo have been saying things like that my whole life. Women too. They smile while they do it. They make it small enough that if you react, You look dramatic, so you learn not to react." Sebastian was silent for so long she looked up. His face had gone still in a way that frightened her, but his eyes were not cold. They were burning. "You will not learn that in my house," he said. Mara let out a shaky laugh. "Your house has a lot of strange lessons." He stepped closer. The wind moved between them, carrying the scent of rain and river water and his dark cologne. Mara. It was the first time he had said her name without formality. Not Miss Bennett. Not my wife for strangers. Just Mara. Low and careful, like something fragile in his mouth. Her breath caught. "I married you for business," he said. "I told myself that made this simple." "And is it?" "No." The city noise faded beneath the sound of her own heartbeat. Sebastian lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to move away. She did not. His fingers brushed the side of her face, so lightly it almost hurt. He touched her like he was not sure he had the right, and that shook her more than his power ever had. "What is it then?" she whispered. His eyes dropped to her mouth. "Dangerous," he said. Then the balcony door opened behind them, and Nico's voice cut softly through the night. "Boss, we have a problem." Sebastian's hand fell away. Mara turned, still unsteady, still warm where he had touched her. Nico looked from Sebastian to Mara, then back again. His face was grim. Dante Varick just arrived. For one quiet second, Mara thought she had misunderstood Nico. The night air was cold against her face, the river glittered below the balcony, and Sebastian stood so close that she could still feel the memory of his fingers against her cheek. Then she looked past Nico through the tall glass doors and saw the change moving through the ballroom like smoke. Conversations softened, smiles stiffened. Men turned their shoulders in careful angles, making room without looking like they were afraid. At the far end of the room, beneath the golden light of the chandeliers, Dante Varick walked in, as if the building belonged to him, and every person inside it was only waiting to be counted. He was not as tall as Sebastian, but he had a clean, sharp beauty that felt almost cruel. His dark blonde hair was brushed back from his face. His white dinner jacket fit perfectly, and his smile was calm enough to be mistaken for charm by anyone who had never seen a snake rest in sunlight. Two men followed him, both quiet, both watchful, both with the kind of hands that looked too comfortable near their jackets. Dante paused near the entrance, accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, and lifted it toward Sebastian in a slow little toast. Sebastian did not move. His whole body had gone still in that frightening way Mara was beginning to understand. Still did not mean calm. Still meant the violence had gone underground. "What is he doing here?" Sebastian asked. Nico's jaw tightened. "The Foundation added him as a donor this morning, through one of Bellini's boards. We caught it late." Sebastian's eyes did not leave Dante. No one adds Dante Varick to a guest list by accident. Mara looked between the two men, trying to keep her voice steady. "That's the man who had Caleb's debt." Sebastian turned to her then, and something in his expression softened for half a breath before the armor returned. "Yes." Dante began crossing the ballroom toward them. He stopped along the way to kiss the hands of old women, shake hands with men who should have known better, and smile at people who visibly wanted him gone. He moved like he enjoyed the discomfort he caused. Mara watched him and felt a thin, cold thread of fear slide down her spine. Sebastian had power like a locked gate. Dante had power like a hand reaching under a table. When he finally reached them, the balcony doors stood open, letting the cold into the golden room. Dante's eyes moved first to Sebastian, then to Mara, and stayed there just a little too long. "Mrs. Romano," Dante said smoothly, "I have been looking forward to meeting you." Mara felt Sebastian's hand settle at her back again. This time, it was not for show. It was warning. "Mr. Varick," she said. Dante smiled. "Please, Dante. We are almost family in a way. Your brother and I had a very close financial relationship." Sebastian's voice cut in softly. You lost that relationship when I bought the debt. I did, Dante said, turning his smile toward him. Very generous of you, though I admit I was surprised. I would have thought a man like you had better things to buy than another man's problems. Mara felt the insult hidden under the words. Another man's problems. Caleb. Her. The marriage. Her skin warmed, but she kept her face still. Sebastian took one slow step forward. My wife is not a subject for your amusement. Dante lifted his brows. Your wife? Already so devoted. That is touching. The word touched sounded wrong in his mouth. Mara saw Sebastian's hand flex once at his side. Dante looked back at her, his gaze softening into something fake and polished. I hope the South Side has treated you kindly, Mara. May I call you Mara? No, Sebastian said. Mara surprised herself by speaking at the same time. No. For a brief moment, Sebastian glanced down at her. The corner of his mouth almost moved, but not quite. Dante laughed under his breath. A strong woman. I see the appeal. You see nothing, Sebastian said. The ballroom around them had become quiet enough that Mara could hear the faint clink of silverware from the dining area. Dante seemed to enjoy that too. He leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice, but not enough. Careful, Sebastian. The old families are watching. You ask them for respect. You ask them for port access. You ask them to believe you were stable. It would be a shame if they saw you lose control over a woman you only married for paperwork. Mara felt the words strike. Not because she did not know the truth. She knew exactly what the marriage had been at the beginning, but hearing it said out loud, by this man, in this room, made something tender inside her pull back into hiding. Sebastian's face changed. Not much. Only enough for Mara to know Dante had made a dangerous mistake. My marriage is not your business, Sebastian said. Everything is business, Dante replied. That is what makes love so expensive. The word love hung in the air, strange and impossible. Sebastian moved so fast that Mara barely saw it. One moment Dante was smiling, and the next Sebastian had him by the front of his white jacket, turning him just enough that the guests saw the threat, but not enough to cause a panic. Nico stepped in close, blocking the view with his body. Dante's men shifted, but Sebastian's guards were already there, appearing from the edges of the ballroom like shadows that had been waiting for permission. Sebastian leaned close to Dante's ear. You came here to test a boundary. Now you know where it is. Leave. Dante's smile did not vanish, but it thinned. You cannot guard every door forever. No, Sebastian said, but I can bury every man who walks through the wrong one. Dante looked at Mara again. For the first time, the mask slipped, and she saw something cold and hungry underneath. Then he lifted his hands in surrender, stepped back, and smoothed his jacket. Enjoy your evening, Mrs. Romano, he said. Chicago can be dangerous after dark. Sebastian did not let Mara out of his sight for the rest of the night. That should have made her feel safe. In a way, it did. But it also made the invisible walls of her life feel thicker. The car ride home was quiet. Sebastian sat beside her, his body angled slightly toward the window, his face hidden in the passing lights. Mara looked at his profile and remembered Dante's words, a woman you only married for paperwork. She wanted to be angry at Dante for saying it, but the cruel thing about truth was that it did not become less sharp because it came from a bad man. Back at the mansion, Sebastian walked her to the stairs. Your security changes tomorrow, he said. 2 guards when you leave the house. No unplanned stops. No visits without advance notice. Mara turned on the first step. So my prison gets prettier and more crowded. His eyes lifted to hers. This is not a game. I know that. Dante threatened you in a room full of witnesses. That means he wanted me to react. He wanted proof that you matter. Mara's throat tightened. Do I? The question escaped before she could stop it. Sebastian went silent. It was only a few seconds, but it felt longer. Long enough for Mara to regret asking. Long enough for her to remember what she was supposed to be. A wife on paper. A promise made to old men. A safe, temporary solution to a problem. When Sebastian finally spoke, his voice was lower than before. Yes. Such a small word. Such a dangerous one. Mara gripped the railing. Then say it like a man who knows what it means. For once, Sebastian looked caught between the truth and the habit of silence. Mara waited, her heart beating hard, but the door inside him closed before he could step through it. "Good night, Mara," he said. She gave him a sad little smile. "That's what I thought." She walked upstairs without looking back. The next week passed in a strange, careful rhythm. Sebastian became more protective and more distant at the same time. He sent extra guards with her when she went to appointments. He assigned a driver who knew 5 different routes to every place she visited. He had Nico review the background of every person who worked near her, and still, at breakfast, he sat across the table with his coffee and his silence, treating her like something too precious to risk and too frightening to touch. Mara tried to return to herself. She helped Mrs. Alvarez plan holiday menus. She reviewed a financial report for Lila's school grant. She called Caleb every evening and listened to him promise, again and again, that he was done gambling, done lying, done making her save him. She wanted to believe him. Love had always made her hopeful in ways logic could not defend. Every Friday morning, she asked to stop at a small bakery in Pilsen. It had been her ritual for years, back when her life still belonged to her. The bakery was warm and cramped, with fogged windows, cinnamon in the air, and a glass case full of pastries that looked like tiny acts of mercy. Sebastian disliked the stop. Mara could tell, but she had given up so much that she refused to give up this one simple thing. The first 2 Fridays, nothing happened. Her guards waited outside. She bought coffee, conchas for the kitchen staff, and a small chocolate cupcake she never ate until she got home. On the 3rd Friday, it was snowing lightly. The city looked softer than usual, its sharp edges blurred under white. Mara stepped into the bakery, smiling when the owner called her by name. Her guards stayed near the front window. That was the mistake. The bell above the door rang twice within the same minute. A mother with a stroller came in, then a delivery man with a stack of boxes. The space became crowded. Someone bumped the display. The owner turned to help. Mara stepped aside to make room. A hand closed over her mouth from behind. For half a second, her mind refused to understand. Then a hard arm locked around her waist, and panic slammed through her body. She tried to scream, but the sound died against a gloved palm. Something sharp pressed into her side. "Quiet," a man breathed into her ear, "or people die." Mara's eyes flew to the window. One of her guards was turning, already sensing something wrong, but then the delivery boxes crashed to the floor, blocking the view. Another man stepped between them. The back door opened behind Mara. Cold air rushed in. She fought. Not gracefully. Not like a woman in a movie. She kicked backward, twisted her body, drove her elbow into whatever she could reach. Her weight, the thing so many people had mocked, became an anchor. She dropped suddenly, making herself heavy, forcing the man to grunt and stumble. His hand slipped from her mouth just enough for one cry to break free. "Sebastian." Then a cloth pressed over her face, sweet and chemical. The bakery lights smeared. The sound of shouting stretched thin. Mara saw the owner's frightened face, saw powdered sugar scattered like snow across the floor, saw her chocolate cupcake crushed beneath someone's shoe. Then everything went dark. She woke to pain first. Her wrists hurt, her shoulder burned, her mouth was dry, and her head felt full of water. Slowly, the world came back in pieces. Concrete floor, metal chair, cold air, a single yellow light swinging overhead, the smell of dust, oil, and old rain. Mara blinked until the room sharpened. She was in a warehouse, tied to a chair with thick plastic restraints around her wrists and ankles. Her coat was gone, her dress was torn near the hem, her cheek throbbed where someone had hit her. Fear rose so fast she almost choked on it. Then she heard Dante's voice. "I told Sebastian he could not guard every door." Mara turned her head. Dante stood a few feet away, wearing a dark coat and leather gloves. He looked pleased, but not excited. That was worse. Excited men made mistakes. Dante looked patient. "You drugged me in a bakery," Mara whispered. "That feels less powerful than you probably imagined." One of Dante's men laughed. Dante did not. He stepped closer and crouched in front of her. "There she is," he said softly. "I wondered if the spine was real." "What do you want?" "From you? Nothing complicated. A phone call, a little crying, a little proof of life. Sebastian signs over his claim to the Southside port contracts, withdraws support from Bellini's council vote, and admits publicly that buying your brother's debt was a mistake." Mara stared at him. "He won't do that." Dante smiled. "For you, he will. No, for me, he will come here and kill you." Dante's smile faded just a little. He stood. "That is the romantic answer," he said. "But men like Sebastian are only romantic until the price gets too high." Mara looked down at her wrists. The plastic ties were tight, biting into her skin. Her hands were cold, but she could still move her fingers. She forced herself to breathe slowly. Panic would make her small. Panic would make her easy. She had spent her life being underestimated because people thought softness meant weakness. Dante had made the same mistake. He thought Sebastian was the only danger in the room. Mara looked around without moving her head too much. 3 men. One near the door, one by a table with phones and weapons, one behind her somewhere, breathing through his nose like he had a cold. Old warehouse, maybe near the river, maybe near the stockyards. There was a cracked window high on the wall, and from somewhere outside came the low horn of a freight train. Dante pulled out his phone. "Let's begin." He held it toward her face. Camera on. Mara looked into the black lens and felt terror press against her ribs. Sebastian would see this. He would see her tied up, bruised, frightened. Dante wanted him wild. Dante wanted the monster because monsters could be trapped. Mara lifted her chin. "Sebastian," she said, her voice shaky but clear, "do not give him anything." Dante's eyes sharpened. Mara kept going. "He needs you emotional. That's the trap. He's near freight tracks. I can hear trains. The building smells like river water and diesel. The floor has old red paint on the concrete. I think it used to be some kind of loading warehouse. There are 3 men inside with him, maybe more outside." Dante struck her. Pain burst across her face, bright and hot. The phone lowered. For a second, the room tilted. Mara tasted blood in her mouth. "You stupid woman," Dante hissed. Mara breathed through the pain and looked back at him. "Forensic accountant. Details are kind of my thing." Dante grabbed her jaw. "You think that helps him? Chicago is full of warehouses." "Yes," Mara whispered, "but now he knows I am awake." For the first time, Dante looked truly angry. He sent the video anyway. Then the waiting began. Mara did not know how much time passed. Minutes stretched strangely when fear sat beside you. Dante paced. His men checked their weapons. Somewhere outside, an engine started and stopped. Mara worked quietly at the restraint around her right wrist. The plastic had a rough edge where it had been tightened. Every small movement scraped her skin raw, but she kept going. Pain was information. Pain meant there was still a body to use. Dante received a message and smiled. "He got it," he said. Mara's heart clenched. "Did he answer?" one of the men asked. Dante looked toward the dark windows. Not yet. That was when Mara heard it. Nothing dramatic, no explosion, no shouting, just a sound missing from the world. The outside guard who had been pacing near the side door stopped pacing. Dante heard it too. His face changed. "Check the door." The man by the entrance lifted his gun and moved forward. He had taken only 3 steps when the lights went out. The warehouse dropped into darkness. Someone cursed. Dante shouted an order. Mara yanked hard at the tie around her wrist. Skin tore. Hot blood slicked her hand. The pain made her gasp, but the wetness helped. She twisted again, harder, and her right hand slipped free. Gunfire cracked through the dark. Mara screamed and folded forward as much as the restraints allowed. Men shouted. Glass shattered. A heavy body hit the floor. The yellow emergency light flickered once, then glowed weakly, painting the room in dim amber. Sebastian stood near the broken side door with a gun in his hand and death in his eyes. For one frozen heartbeat, Mara forgot the pain. She forgot the warehouse. She forgot Dante. There was only Sebastian, no longer polished for old families or charity galas, no longer hiding behind quiet manners and expensive suits. His coat was open, his hair was wet from the snow, and his face was stripped of everything except fury. Dante grabbed Mara from behind before she could move. A gun pressed to her temple. "Stop!" Dante shouted. Sebastian stopped. The entire warehouse seemed to hold its breath. Nico and several of Sebastian's men moved in from the shadows, weapons raised. Dante's remaining man was on the floor, groaning. Mara's right hand was free, hidden near her side, but her ankles and left wrist were still bound. Dante's arm tightened around her throat. "Put the gun down, Sebastian." Sebastian looked at Mara, not at Dante, at Mara. His eyes moved over her bruised cheek, her bleeding wrist, the torn dress, the fear she could no longer hide. Something broke across his face so quickly that only she saw it. Not weakness, not exactly, pain. Then he lowered his gun. "Sebastian, no," Mara whispered. Dante laughed, breathless and wild now. There he is, the great Romano, on his knees for a contract wife. Sebastian's voice was quiet. "Let her go. You should have let me keep the brother," Dante said. "You should have stayed out of my business." "She was never your business." Dante pressed the gun harder against Mara's temple. "She became my business when you made her your heart." The word heart moved through Mara like a shock. Sebastian did not deny it. He looked at her, and in the middle of that cold, terrible room, with guns raised and blood on the floor, Mara finally saw the truth he had been too afraid to speak. It was there, in the raw fear behind his fury. He was not afraid of Dante. He was afraid of losing her. Dante was watching Sebastian, enjoying his power too much to watch Mara's hand. That was his last mistake. Mara grabbed the broken plastic tie still looped around her right wrist and drove the sharp edge backward into Dante's hand as hard as she could. He shouted, jerking the gun away from her head. At the same time, she dropped her full weight forward, making the chair tilt. Dante lost balance for 1 second. 1 second was all Sebastian needed. He moved like a shadow freed from the wall. The gunshot was deafening. Dante's weapon flew from his hand. Nico rushed forward. Mara hit the floor hard, chair and all, pain flashing through her knees and shoulder. She heard shouting, fighting, Dante cursing, Sebastian's voice low and terrible. Then hands were on her. For a moment, she fought blindly. "Mara, Mara, it's me." Sebastian. He cut the restraints with a knife, his hands moving fast but shaking. Shaking. Sebastian Romano, the man everyone feared, was shaking as he freed her. The second her legs were loose, he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I've got you," he said against her hair. "I've got you. I'm here." Mara clung to him. The warehouse blurred around her. She heard Dante groaning somewhere behind them, heard Nico giving orders, heard men moving, but none of it mattered. Sebastian's arms were around her, warm and hard and real. She buried her face in his chest, and finally let the fear break open. "I thought I was going to die," she whispered. Sebastian's hand cradled the back of her head. His breath shook. So did I. That confession frightened her more than the warehouse. Sebastian pulled back just enough to look at her face. His thumb hovered near her bruised cheek, not touching the swelling. His eyes were wet, though no tears fell. "I am sorry," he said. "You came. I almost came too late." "But you came." Behind them, Dante laughed weakly from the floor. He was pinned beneath Nico's knee, bleeding from the arm, but still alive. "Touching," he coughed. "Really? But you think this ends anything? The old families will see what she is now. Your weakness. Your soft little wound." Sebastian went very still. Mara felt the change and grabbed his wrist. "Sebastian." He looked down at her. She knew what Dante wanted, even now. One more reaction, one more public act of rage. One more reason for the old families to whisper that Mara made Sebastian reckless. So she stood, though her legs shook. Sebastian tried to stop her, but she squeezed his hand. Mara turned toward Dante. "No," she said, her voice raw but steady. "You were wrong. I am not his weakness." Dante spat blood onto the concrete. "No?" Mara stepped closer, still holding Sebastian's hand. "I am the reason he will think before he burns the whole city down. I am the reason he has something to build. And that scares you because all you know how to do is take." Dante stared at her with hate bright in his eyes. Mara looked at Nico. "Make sure he lives long enough to lose everything legally, financially, and publicly." Nico blinked once, then looked at Sebastian. Sebastian's gaze stayed on Mara. Slowly, a dark, proud smile touched his mouth. "As my wife says," he murmured. Dante's face twisted as Nico hauled him away. By dawn, Dante Varric's empire had begun to collapse. Mara did not see most of it. Sebastian took her home before the sun came up, wrapped in his coat, guarded by half his men, and held against his side like he was afraid the world might still try to steal her. At the mansion, Mrs. Alvarez cried openly when Mara walked in. Lila covered her mouth. Thomas crossed himself. The house that had once felt like a beautiful prison suddenly felt full of frightened people who had been waiting for her to return. A doctor cleaned her wrists, checked her cheek, and gave her something for the pain. Sebastian stayed the whole time. He did not speak much. He simply stood near the wall, watching every movement the doctor made, his face so hard that the poor man's hands shook. Later, when the room was quiet and the house had settled into a tired hush, Mara sat on the edge of her bed in a soft robe. Her body ached everywhere. Her wrists were bandaged. Her cheek was swollen. She felt fragile and strange, like a glass that had cracked but not broken. Sebastian stood near the fireplace with the marriage contract in his hand. Mara stared at it. "Why do you have that?" He looked down at the pages as if they disgusted him. "Because this is where I hid." She did not understand until he walked to the fire. Sebastian. He held the contract over the flames. The paper caught slowly at first, then all at once. Orange light curled around the edges, eating through signatures, terms, money, years, rules. Mara rose from the bed, heart pounding. "What are you doing?" "Ending the arrangement." The last page blackened and fell into ash. Sebastian turned to her. He looked exhausted. Not weak, but stripped down to something honest and wounded beneath the power. "Your brother's debt is gone," he said. "Not transferred, not hidden, gone. The money promised to you is already in an account under your name. You can leave when you are ready. Tonight, tomorrow, next month. I will give you guards if you want them and privacy if you do not. No one will follow you. No one will force you back." Mara stared at him, her throat tight. "You're freeing me." "Yes. Because Dante took me? Because I should have done it before anyone had the chance." His voice roughened. "I told myself I was protecting you. I told myself the contract made things clean. But I put you in the center of my world and acted like paperwork could keep your heart safe from it. I was a coward. You? Mara whispered. A coward? Sebastian's mouth tightened. With you, yes. The fire cracked softly behind him. I know how to kill for what I want, he said. I know how to threaten, buy, punish, and win, but I do not know how to ask to be loved by the woman I trapped. Mara's eyes burned. He stepped closer, but stopped before reaching her. For once, he did not take the space. He offered it. I love you, Sebastian said. The words were quiet. No drama, no demand, no performance for a ballroom. Just truth, low and unprotected. Mara pressed a hand to her chest, as if she could hold herself together from the outside. I love you, he said again, like the first time had not cost him enough. And because I love you, you are free. Mara looked at the man in front of her, the feared ruler of the South Side, the cold husband who had become her shelter, the monster who had fallen apart when he saw her hurt. The man who had burned the only chain between them and left himself with nothing but the hope that she might choose him without it. She thought of her old apartment, her old desk, her old careful clothes. She thought of every room where she had tried to make herself smaller. She thought of the bakery, the warehouse, the ballroom, the balcony, the way Sebastian had said, I see you, as if those words had always belonged to her. You are impossible, she whispered. His eyes lowered. I know. And controlling. Yes. And terrifying. To most people, to everyone, she said, and despite everything, a small laugh broke through her tears. Sebastian looked up. Mara crossed the room slowly. Her whole body hurt, but every step felt like her own. When she reached him, she placed her bandaged hand against his chest. His heart was beating hard beneath her palm. I am not staying because of the debt, she said. His breath caught. I am not staying because of the money. I am not staying because I am scared to leave. Sebastian did not move. Then why? Mara looked up at him. Because I love you too, and because this time I am choosing. For a moment, he looked like the words had wounded him. Then he pulled her into his arms with a sound that was almost broken, burying his face in her hair. He held her carefully because she was hurt, but desperately because she was his, and for once that word did not feel like a cage. It felt like a home, built by two people who had both survived too much to pretend softness was weakness. When he kissed her, it was nothing like the chapel. It was slow, shaking, and full of every word he had not known how to say. Mara kissed him back, with tears on her cheeks and her hands against his heart, feeling the last of the contract turn to ash behind them. A year later, Mara Romano walked into the same charity gala where Carlo De Luca had once made her feel small. Only this time, no one laughed. The ballroom was brighter than she remembered, or maybe she was. She wore a deep midnight blue gown made to fit every curve instead of hide them. Diamonds rested at her throat, but they were not the reason people stared. They stared because she moved differently now. She did not hurry past mirrors. She did not fold her arms across her body. She did not search the room for permission to exist. She walked beside Sebastian with her head high, her hand resting lightly in his, and the calm confidence of a woman who had learned the shape of her own power. Sebastian wore black, as always. But there was something different in him too. The old danger remained. It always would. But the emptiness had softened. Men still feared him. The old families still lowered their voices when he passed. But now they also watched Mara before making decisions, because they had learned what Dante Varik had learned too late. She saw what others missed. In the year since the warehouse, Mara had become more than Sebastian's wife. She had found hidden money in Dante's companies, exposed the judges on his payroll, and handed enough clean evidence to the right people to bury what remained of his power without starting a street war. She had reorganized Sebastian's legitimate businesses until even his accountants looked at her like she performed magic. She had created scholarships through the foundation, helped the kitchen staff buy homes, and quietly paid for treatment programs for gamblers who reminded her too much of Caleb. Caleb was healthy now, not perfect, not magically fixed, but honest. He worked at one of Sebastian's legal warehouses, under Thomas's watchful eye, and called Mara every Sunday without asking for money. Carlo De Luca was there too, standing near the edge of the room with a glass of water and the nervous posture of a man who had spent a year learning humility. When Mara passed him, he lowered his eyes. "Mrs. Romano," he said, "you look beautiful." Mara paused. Sebastian's hand tightened slightly around hers, but she only smiled. "Thank you, Carlo." It was not forgiveness. Not exactly. It was something better, proof that his words no longer owned even a corner of her. Later, Sebastian led her to the balcony, overlooking the river. The same balcony, the same cold air, the same city shining below them, like a field of stars someone had spilled across the dark. Mara leaned against the railing. "You know, this is where everything became complicated." Sebastian stood beside her. "It was complicated before that." She looked at him. "You just refused to admit it." "I was trying to be practical. You married a forensic accountant to impress crime families. That was practical. You fell in love with her." His mouth curved. "That was inevitable." Mara laughed softly, and Sebastian watched her like he still could not believe she was real. From inside the ballroom came music, warm and low. The city moved beneath them, alive with secrets and sirens and ordinary people going home through the cold. Somewhere out there were men who still feared Sebastian Romano, men who thought power was only guns, contracts, ports, and blood. But inside the Romano Empire, things had changed. Power had learned to sit at breakfast with bare feet and messy hair. Power remembered birthdays. Power read balance sheets at midnight. Power kissed the staff on both cheeks and made dangerous men apologize in public. Sebastian stepped behind Mara and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her gently against him. His hands rested over her stomach with quiet reverence. "They still think you made me weaker," he said. Mara leaned back into him. "Did I?" His lips brushed her temple. "No. You made me want to build something that could survive me." She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the words settle. Once, Mara Bennett had been a desperate woman with a brother in trouble, a careful wardrobe, and a life built around surviving quietly. She had walked into Sebastian's mansion, believing she was entering a prison. She had signed a contract because fear gave her no better choice. But fear had not been the end of her story. It had been the door. Now the underworld looked at her and saw what Sebastian had seen before he knew what it meant. Not weakness, not softness to exploit, not a temporary wife placed beside a king for decoration. They saw the woman who had survived Dante Varick, the woman who had turned ledgers into weapons, the woman who had taught the South Side's most feared ruler that devotion did not make a man less powerful. It gave his power somewhere to belong. Mara opened her eyes and looked out over Chicago. The city did not feel like a cage anymore. It felt like a kingdom. And standing beside Sebastian, loved without apology, feared without cruelty, and seen without shame, Mara finally understood the truth every enemy had missed from the beginning. She had never been the heart Sebastian needed to protect because it was fragile. She was the heart of his empire because everything powerful beat from her.